A few hundred years ago, when lawmakers put together the first declarations of human rights, say the U.S. Bill of Rights, the First Amendment in particular, the French Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen, people were for the first time given legal right to speak their minds on just about anything. The usual break on that was libel, slander, that sort of thing. You couldn't do that. But still, if you wanted to question what the people in power were doing or how the country was run, you now had the right to do so. You had the right to investigate anyone else violating someone else's rights. You had the right to speak what you actually believed to be true. I'm sure that there was a healthy debate that took place around the time that these great acts were taken. And I'm sure that people were aware of the potential pratfalls of a culture of free expression, i.e., they would have said that, well, yes, the intent behind these sorts of things is to allow people to do the right thing, to say the right thing, to speak their mind, to question authority, and to say what is actually true. Orwell would have put it as, freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4. Once that is granted, all else follows. I'm sure also that they would have discussed the potential pratfalls of a culture of free expression, i.e., well, suddenly people would now have the right to start saying very inflammatory things. You'd have demagogues, you would have firebrands up there rabble-rousing and doing offensive things just for the sake of being offensive. That is a byproduct of freedom, and freedom, like anything else, can be abused. Now, I'm sure that most people are willing to pay that price. It's not the intent, however, and we mustn't confuse the one with the other. Just because you have the right to be offensive, it doesn't mean that you are not abusing that right whenever you opt to be offensive. The offensive bit is just a byproduct. I have to consume food to stay alive, but 8 hours later we know that there is a byproduct to that. And I'm afraid to use such metaphors, but unfortunately, people at the Dove World Outreach Center and their Burn a Qur'an Day are a very good example of the unfortunate and inevitable byproduct of a culture of freedom of speech. You cannot have free speech without being willing to accept its byproducts, but one must not confuse the intent of freedom of speech with its unfortunate byproducts. Burn a Qur'an Day is a very unfortunate byproduct of a culture of freedom of expression, of freedom of speech, freedom of conscience. It's not the intent. A very important distinction to be made. Especially to those who are advocating going ahead with such ceremonies, with such gestures, simply to underline their commitment to people's rights to do as they please. I won't question anyone's right to do as they please. But remember, rights can be abused. I do not support any calculated or public or deliberate abuse of any right. I don't advocate any restrictions to be placed on anyone's ability to abuse their rights. But with rights come responsibilities, and the number one responsibility in a civilized society is to behave like a civilized human being. If you opt not to do that, then you're showing yourself unworthy of the freedom that actually is your right. Thank you.